Hello Abnormals and welcome to the Ministry of Abnormality. I am your host, O Abnormal, and today I want to talk to you about the flow of ideas and how it's not just a matter of chance. You don't have to just hope that good ideas come to you. There can be a method to it. No guarantees though. Technical skill to produce art is one thing, and we can never forget to be constantly working on improving our skills. But what about the ideas? Not how we draw things, but what we draw. How do we come up with good ideas that capture people's attention? So today I want to share a method with you I like to call IDEARRHEA. I just call it that way because it makes me laugh. But maybe incorporating it into your own process will help you out of a mental blockage. Intestinal blockage? Whatever. Okay. No, that's enough. My grandmother was an elegant, sophisticated woman. And she always used to say that when you have diarrhea, you shouldn't try to stop it. Let's see if it goes the same way with ideas for art. We're always told to think outside of the box, that unique and interesting ideas will pave the way to success, that we have to show people something they haven't seen before. We constantly expect to be shown things we've never seen or thought of, and we'll even criticize anything that we see, but we've already seen. And yeah, we get it. The concept is clear. We are all familiar with it. Think outside of the box. But how do you control that? Is there like a formula for good ideas? I say a lot that interesting art sells better than just plain good art. But who determines what is interesting? It's a difficult thing to measure because what is interesting and what isn't depends on the past experiences of the viewer. I live in a valley, a city surrounded by mountains on all sides. And you would be amazed at how fascinating it is, for me, to simply visit another place that actually has a horizon, which is probably most of the planet. But in my daily life, I never see the horizon. So the simple act of being able to look off into the distance and not have my line of view interrupted by a mountain will always have a hint of strangeness to me. Something that most people have probably not even considered. And then, for most people, visiting my city and feeling like you're living in the bottom of a gigantic bowl made of mountainsides is probably just as fascinating as a horizon is to me. So, is there a way we can manipulate the artistic process in order to improve our chances of coming up with good, interesting, innovative, out-of-the-box ideas? Sure. It doesn't guarantee the results, but it can improve our chances. Allow me to share the method I like to call IDEARRHEA. In case you didn't know, I didn't actually study art at the university. My degree is in graphic design, and while it's somewhat arguably connected to art, it's definitely not art. I didn't actually want to be a designer, and I didn't end up working as a graphic designer either, but that's another story for another time. For now, let's leave it at that I studied graphic design, and one of the skills that I got from it that I currently apply in my art is that of a rigorous design process. Whenever we had a project, we would follow the same steps, monitored by our teachers, of course. First, we would do a lot of research, gather images and information, and create mood boards and stuff. And then, we would sketch out ideas. Like 50 of them. Seriously. At the time of being a student, it was always annoying to have to sketch out dozens upon dozens of ideas. Particularly because we always thought that within the first few, we already had what we needed. And in retrospect, maybe 50 was a bit much. But after some time, you come to understand the lesson. See, what would happen was that after a few good ideas, you'd just start sketching out nonsense. Slight variations on already existing ideas you knew were no good, but you'd add them anyway to pad out the numbers. And finally, you'd add in a couple of ideas that were just plain ridiculous, simply to adjust for those 50 that you needed. It all seemed very silly and unnecessary at the time, but this part of the process eventually proved to be one of the most essential to my work nowadays. One of the most common comments we would receive from teachers back in class was that our ideas were too immediate, too obvious. And I would agree that a lot of times a good idea can come right out in front, like the first thing you got is brilliant. But that rarely ever happens. The truth of the matter is that most good ideas take a bit of exploration before you get to them. The problem is that we are trapped inside of our own heads, and that when we think we got a good idea, we cling to it as if our brains were incapable of ever producing something of value ever again. Not only that, but we'll frequently act as if our good ideas had way more value than they actually do. And if somebody even so much as suggests that our idea is anything other than brilliant, we'll take it as an attack and we'll cling on to it even harder. And sure, we might have some good ideas here and there, but it's very important that we don't marry ourselves to an idea, because then we won't be willing to leave it no matter what happens. And I don't mean that the idea necessarily sucks or anything like that, but the danger is that if the idea does suck, maybe we won't even be willing to consider that possibility. That's where it gets dangerous for us. So the idea here is that we are not the best judges of our own ideas. So we can't trust ourselves to look at a single idea of our own and decide if it meets all the requirements we've spoken about. Naturally, working with a team of people and stuff like that, or an art director, helps with this process. But we don't always have that, and at a certain point we all have to produce our own ideas on our own. And that's where the IDEARRHEA comes in. See, when you force yourself to come up with more ideas, not so much because you think the one you've got isn't good, but because it's a requirement, you'll start to explore ideas you wouldn't have otherwise, just in order to fill that requirement. Your mind will start to just push out thoughts and notions that you wouldn't have even considered. And among those, you might end up finding the brilliance you were looking for. So, how does it work? It's actually quite simple. First of all, never jump into the final version of an image. Obviously, this doesn't mean that every single time you put pen to tablet, you have to go through the rigors of process and planning. Of course not. But not all art is made the same, and while sometimes we might just be doodling for fun, if we want to actually make a finalized art piece, it's going to take some planning and process. You know, it's not the same to just sketch in your notebook while you're watching a show or in a boring class than to make a book cover that's a paid job. So these things you want to plan and process. So you start off with some research, of course, mood boarding and gathering of reference images. This is not negotiable. All artists have to do this, but that's not the topic of this video, so let's not stop there. Once you're done with that, you set a number of ideas that you're going to thumbnail. These aren't final sketches, so none of them should take more than a few minutes to make. I rarely ever go up to something like 50 like they used to make me do in class, but I do like to never do less than 3. I almost always end up doing more than that, so I normally get to 6 or so before I start to run out. At this point, what you have to do is force yourself to make some more. And that's when weird things start to happen. The first couple of that extra batch, let's call it the extra batch, will be really lame, probably. Just the garbage ideas that were lying around behind the surface ideas. But once you've scraped those off, you'll get the ideas that were behind all of that. Now don't put too much thought into it, just let the IDEARRHEA flow. Like my grandmother said. You'll know you're done when the ideas start to flow into other territories. Like if you're trying to come up with an idea for a car, and after dozens and dozens of ideas you find yourself drawing trees, then you know it's time to stop. Next, step away from your idea board and give yourself a break. Focus your mind on something else for a few minutes. Then come back and circle, let's say, 3 of them, to take a step further in the sketching process. Make sure that at least one of those 3 is from the extra batch, from that second half of ideas. At this point, you'll definitely be more capable of choosing one of those, and then continuing with it to finalization. Which coincidentally is something that you can also say at the end of a sexual interaction. Finalization. Well, I mean, if you never want to see that person again. And there you have it. The idea behind this method is to access ideas that we might not have even considered otherwise. But do keep in mind that it takes a certain amount of discipline to force yourself to produce more ideas than what you would normally consider necessary. That's why it's so important to practice your thumbnail sketching skills, so that you'll produce them quickly and the idea of making a lot of them doesn't become a huge inconvenience and a time sink every single time. A thumbnail sketch should never take more than a couple of minutes, so you might have to practice thumbnail sketching as well. That might even be a topic for another video, but you'll find a lot of tutorials online and a lot of videos about thumbnail sketching. Being an efficient sketcher is incredibly important for the production of ideas, especially if you're going to do it this way. Also keep in mind that no matter what, there are no guarantees here. No matter what we do, we're still limited by what's in our own minds. So be sure to feed your mind constantly with more and more things, because that is the fuel that keeps your idea tank full. Remember that you can't just produce art and do nothing else, because the ideas that we convert into art are taken from our own lives and our own experiences. If all you ever do is art, soon enough you will truly have nothing left in there to draw ideas from. So be sure to read, watch movies, play games, listen to music, and of course go out and see things and do things. Remember always that interesting people make interesting things. So you gotta go out and make your life interesting. And there you have it. My method for producing ideas. Give it some thought and maybe try it out. Or you don't have to do all of it. Maybe you can just grab bits of pieces of it, change it around, adapt it to your own way of doing things. Maybe you have a different method. If you do, I would love to read about it. I would love to check it out, because I love these productivity tricks. I love reading about it. And hey, I think you can never try out enough different approaches to this kind of thing. Just be sure to post it in the comments, because that way, not only I can benefit from it, but the other people watching this video can check it out as well. So yeah, I'd definitely like to see whatever you got if you have something different. At this point, I'm supposed to tell you that, thank you for watching the video, comment and subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff. That's what I'm supposed to do, and what you're supposed to do is that. So, having done that, you can also check me out on Instagram. That's where I mostly hang out other than YouTube, so it's mostly YouTube and Instagram for me these days. So yeah, check me out there. And, well, yeah, thank you for watching and all that. Please, if you have any ideas of how I can make these videos better, be sure to let me know, and also let me know if there's anything that you would like me to talk about. This final part is always so difficult for me. I suck at goodbyes and all that, and so I guess this is it. I hope the video was useful to you. But yeah, I mean,